On this episode of Carnage, we're doing some upgrades to the Supermang. This is the Supermang. It's a grandpa spec VN Berliner that we bought just before coronavirus hit. We paid about $4 for it and everyone lost their mind. They said, you paid way too much for that car. Look who's laughing now, because $4 for a VN Berliner, you cannot get one now, I tell you that. It's, sure, the bonnet looks a bit ugly with this different color bonnet on it, and we will do something about that later once we decide what the final engine will be. But the car is actually in pretty good condition, low kilometers. I think it had 117,000 Ks on it when we bought it. And our idea was to put a Supercharged 6 engine in, an L67 engine, which we have done. So we've put our L67 in. It makes decent horsepower, not amazing horsepower, makes 280 horsepower at the rear wheels. So probably not quite 400 horsepower at the flywheel, which is not bad for a 3.8 litre V6. Remember, this is a dinosaur motor. These motors first came out in the VS Commodore, which was, you know, this is a VN, then you had VP, VR, VS, all right? So these engines arrived in the VS and they carried through to the VY. So, you know, so from VS it went VT, X, Y. So they're all very old and kind of obsolete. You know, there's push rod, V6, 90 degrees, so they run pretty rough. But, you know, like I said, 280 horsepower at the wheels isn't too bad, and it runs 12.5 at 106 plus mile an hour. So it gets along, and that's only at 8 PSI boost. So we want to do some upgrades to it. Eventually, we want to put a big supercharger on it, and I'll show you that soon, but it's not happening today. What we're going to do in the meantime though is fix this supercharger snout, because at the moment we're at the limit of how small a pulley we can put on this snout. We need a machined snout to go on to this supercharger, so we can put smaller pulleys on it. But to do that we have to rebuild the other snout because it leaks badly. It's got a dud seal in the front of it, so we're going to put new bearings, new seals in it, fix that. So we'll show you how to do that. Also, we borrowed the dash from our Lexan project and it wants it back. So what we could do is hit up Haltech for another IC7 and put it into this car. Sure, we could do that, but we have a dash, a digital dash sitting around that's doing nothing, and we might as well use it in this car, and there's actually a reason to do that dash rather than going to the Haltech IC7. Let's explain. So here we are, sitting in the VN, looking at our Haltech IC7 digital dash. It looks amazing. However, there is a problem in that the lower section of the digital dash is cut off by the fascia of this Berliner control pack, you know, so it's got cruise control buttons and all sorts of stuff. You know, so we could cut away the lower section of this fascia unit and reveal the whole dash. However, I mean, once I cut that away, it kind of screws up this thing, and I really don't want to. It's not just, you know, a base spec Commodore fascia. It's, you know, it's a Berliner. It's got a lot of good stuff in it, and let's keep it looking pristine. So we have an option that we can replace the Haltech IC7 with something else that will allow us to see our whole dash without having to modify all this plastic gadgetry. So to fix that, we have this. That's right, it's another 3D printed dash insert made by Mako Motorsports. They do excellent 3D dashes. We paid for it, it's not a freebie, we're just saying they're excellent. So we've got that. It's got an IQ3 logger dash that we had in the MX-5 years ago. We pulled it out, put an IC7 in it because, you know, we like the color. However, this, you can see it sits more off the bottom of the dash, so we're going to get all the information within our view. It won't look as pretty as an IC7, but we'll have all the information, it'll work great, and it kind of suits the VN, I think, and it'll work well for what we want. So we'll bolt that in, connect it to the back. We have to re-pin the back because they have a completely different pin order. So we'll have to download the pin order and change a few things around, but we should be able to make it all work within this, bolt it in, and be able to see it all perfectly. Right, so I've jumped on the Haltech website and downloaded the pinout information for both the IQ3 and the IC7. And obviously there's a fair few differences, so we'll pull the dash out, get it out, and see what we're dealing with. Get our little Ryobi screwdriver in here. Over there for the moment. Well, here are our 3D printed dashes. Now that's the one we just had in the car, so it's got the IC7 dash in there. Now the actual 3D printed part is actually, well, a bit rough, to be honest. I can't remember where I bought it from. I just found someone on the old interwebs, and this is what arrived, and to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed. And then obviously this one from Mako looks amazing. Really happy with that. And I was so impressed that I actually bought another one. So this one's going in the Lexan with the IC7 in it, but you can see like it's a better shape, like it's just better made. I mean, look at it. It's so much nicer. So yeah. I think that is going to look great in the VN and work well. So Haltech uses a 34-pin AMP connector on the back of these. You just got to sort of push down and click them, click the separator, and then just you'll be able to pull all the wires out. So we've already clicked it. Yep, she's open. Now I just got to pull the wires out as I need them. There's yellow. White. Blue. Yep. There we go. So left turn signal. Right, so I'm pretty confident I've got all the wires in the right positions in the plug, so we're just going to do a little test now. Plug the plug into our dash and see if it all works. Don't tell me it's a different actual plug. It's not, is it? Wow, you wouldn't believe it, but it's actually a different plug. They're both 34 pin and they both look the same, except the little registers that help locate the plug in the right spot are in different locations. So the plug that we had for this dash is still in the Mazda wiring loom, so we might have to go recover that from the Mazda. It's not like it's being used. And then switch all these plugs and wires into the other plug. Why is nothing ever simple? Why couldn't you have just used the same connector? Bugger. I have the plug. Wow, they're almost identical too. So we have two plugs. They're AMP connectors, 34 pin. And if you put them side by side, they look almost identical, except this one has two registers at the bottom to locate the plug. This one has one in a different location. So I'm going to have to take all our wires from the back of this plug and put them into this plug so we can plug it into our IQ3 dash. Green. Okay, now we click, got all our wires in, click our plug closed. All right, so make sure none of the wires can pull out. It's a good thing with these connectors. Now we can test the actual dash itself. So let's plug in and see what happens. All right. All right, we're ready to test. Hopefully no smoke comes out. Okay, that was fuel pressure, I guess. So, we're in park. Okay, it looks like we've got some configuring to do. More fun. So I have tried logging into the digital dash and it's not cooperating. So I'm going to have to put a call into Haltech's customer support. I'll do that later. In the meantime though, I just want to push forward with the supercharger snout. So this is the old supercharger we had on the VN. It's got the machine snout on it for the smaller pulleys, all right? So to run either of these pulleys, you need to have the snout machined like this, which our mate Baz from Baz Spec Fabrications did for us quite a while ago. However, this snout has a leaky front seal and the supercharger is super noisy, so there's something going on. So whether it's noisy because the oil's leaked out the front seal, I don't know, but we've got to rebuild this snout, and our mates at Mace Performance have sent us a whole rebuild kit here. So we've got new supercharger oil, new bearings, new coupler, all the gear and a new seal, so we can rebuild that snout. So let's start by sucking out the oil with this little device, and we'll rebuild this snout, and then we'll suck the oil out of that supercharger, pull that snout off without removing the supercharger, hopefully, and we'll switch this snout to that supercharger so we can change the pulleys and make more boost, more power, and go faster. That is the plan. Excuse me while I suck this dry. That's what she said. All right, let's see how much we got out of that. Well, it looks like we sucked that out pretty good because we don't have much fluid there, so it means we can do the same on the car without spilling oil everywhere, which will really suck. That's great. However, we've got to work over here, so let's clean this up, get the excess oil off it. So there's two bearings in there, one at this end, one at that end, and then there's also a seal at the front. So you basically got to press the shaft out and then press it back in with new bearings and new seal. It's not too hard. It's actually not too hard at all, just as long as you do it in the right order without breaking anything. So now we've got our snout nice and clean, but how cool is our little Hare and Forbes teardown bench? It's got a drain in the middle so we can spray away without making a huge mess. It all drains away into a bucket, which we can empty at a later time. But yeah, I love this teardown bench. It is fantastic. Anyway, so let's pop the retainer of the front seal. Come on. There he goes. Spring. Now, just got to press the shaft out of the snout. All right, so we're going to start by pushing the shaft down. It will make a slight popping noise. go. There we go. Okay, so that has popped that out. So there we go. So there's still a seal and a bearing in the front. And then there's a bearing there and a spring. So don't forget the spring when you put that back into there. So to push out our front bearing and seal, we've got a long 19mm socket on a 6-inch extension. I'm going to slide that in there. And that will sit down here. And we'll push it out. Alright, so there's the front seal. It's kaput. Alright, now for the bearing. Right, there we have it, our bearing pressed out. So now the housing is completely without bearings and seals. Let's clean it up and get it ready for some new bearings and seals. So we have a small bearing and a large bearing. Large bearing is for the front of the snout, small bearing is for the shaft. So let's press that off. So we have our shaft, we have our little bearing separator, so we're going to slide that in and we'll close it up under the bearing. Okay. Whoa. She pops with a bang. All right, we just wipe our shaft clean and reassemble. Basically, it's just a reversal of the process. So small bearing will go up here. We'll seat it with our coupler and then we'll reassemble the case with bearing and all the stuff. So with our clean shaft, we're gonna just whack a little bit of oil on there. If our oil can will do its thing, which it won't. You son of a bitch. Just a bit of engine oil. So no doubt someone will say, but they don't run engine oil in the Supercharger. Look, this small amount is not going to hurt anything. All right, so get the biggest socket you can find that'll go inside the pins, but around the diameter of the shaft. And we'll put it under there. All right, now we just need that bearing to seat down there. There we go. Bearing spins freely. We are all good. Next step. So now we go large bearing. That's got to be pressed down into there. We'll just whack a little bit of lube in there again, just to make sure it slides in nicely. So now we've got to press our bearing into our snout. We're going to use our seal and bearing press from Hare & Forbes. Basically it's a whole bunch of these in various sizes. So we flip it upside down. That is just enough diameter to fit inside the snout, but and allow it to press fully on the bearing. Yep, it looks in there nicely and spins freely as it should. So now it's time to stick our shaft up our snout. Yep, And yeah, the temptation is to put it in there with your spring and everything and then just start pushing from the end. However, you'll start pushing that bearing out. So what we're going to have to do is support the bearing with this very large deep socket that has to be deep enough to handle the end of the shaft in the socket, but also wide enough to support the bearing. Luckily we have a tool distributor next door, so I've ducked in there and bought an appropriately large socket to do this. Anyway, so let's whack a little bit of oil in there to lube up some stuff. So make sure that we're not going to gall up the aluminium case or the inside of the bearing or the shaft or anything else. A little bit of lube goes a long way, and that is what she said. So, to there, and socket on there. Alrighty, I think we're down. Okay, that out of there, and that should spin freely, and it does. Alright, now it's time for our seal. Now, if you try and push it on there, it might bend the seal back, so what you do is get a socket, like a 14mm, seems to be about the right size. Poke it through the seal, that'll hold the seal open, and you line it up, and just using a little bit of lube, it will slide on down. And then we'll use our large socket, which we already know fits, and just tap that seal down in there till it's all the way in, and use our retainer, and we'll be all done. So we'll get our retainer in there. There we have it. Alright, so now we've just got to put our coupler on the front. That's on our other supercharger snout. This will be a little bit harder to turn now because it's turning against the seal, but that's natural. As long as it's not binding up anywhere, you're right to go. So now we've got to suck the oil out of that one, take the coupler off it, put the coupler onto there, put this on there, and we can make boosty noises at a higher level than we did before. Okay, pop our belt off, slide him off there, there we go, undo our little oil plug, oh, there we go, suck me dry. Alright, to remove the supercharger snout, I think it's going to help if we remove the alternator as well, which won't take us long. It just make things a lot easier. Probably should have loosened them off while they were on the car. Alright, now we just remove that from the snout, which is pretty easy. Rightio. There's our coupler. That's all we need. So now we're just got to press that onto there. We'll just put a bit of anti-seize on the shaft. Press it down so it is dead flat across the front face, and that will be lined up perfectly for when we put our undersized pulley on there. Cool. Clean it, lube it, press it, and then fit it to the car. Okay, I think we're down all the way. Now it's flush with the front of the coupling. So now when the pulley goes on, it will line up with all the other pulleys. So that is pretty much ready to bolt back on to the car. And yes, it's so hot in here, I am sweating like a pig. Fun with cars. So now we're getting ready to put our snout on the car. Now not everyone will agree with this bit. So these surfaces are just machined flat. Usually there's no real sealant between them, but I like to put a little bit of this, you know, Insta-gasket type stuff. Just a slight smear, just to help make sure that nothing's going to leak out of it. Nothing worse than bolting something on a car and then having it leak afterwards. So I do have a new coupling in here, a nylon coupling that goes on the 3 prongs there and on the 3 prongs of the gear of the Supercharger. But that coupling is probably less than 4 months old, so I'll just stick with this one and we'll save that as a spare for later. There we go. Alrighty. Alright, so now it's time to torque up our snout. Now I looked up 5 or 6 different pages and got a different answer every time. General consensus seemed to be somewhere between 15 and 17 foot-pounds. So let's say, look, I reckon if you went 20 Newton meters, you'd probably be safe. So let's look at that and see how we go. But as they say, it's the old German spec, Guten Tag. Guten Tag, yeah. Now it's time for some lubrication. AC Delco Supercharger oil. It's better than normal oil. It says it right there on the bottle. Supercharger. That's right. So we'll put this in there. It is actually supposed to be better for your blower than normal, you know, engine oil, which you're not supposed to use. So we'll put this in there. Need 2 bottles at least. Alrighty, 2 bottles of oil. Let's seal up the goodness. Okay. Wow, it is hot in here. But the job is done. Well, the job's done except for it is time to put a pulley on it. Which pulley do we put on it? Well, this is going to disappoint some people because we're going to put the old 3.2 inch pulley back on it, which is what was on it, which made 8 pounds of boost and did a 12.53. Why I'm doing that? Well, the belt's already on the car, it's easy to do, and it is too hot to be in here screwing around with this stuff. However, moving forward, we have these 2 pulleys, the 2.9 inch. Don't know what boost it makes, it's never been on the car because we haven't got a belt for it. And then we have the 2.55 inch, which, you know, yeah, it's the party pulley. But I think it spins the Supercharger too fast. I think it makes too much heat for the gains in boost that it makes. So I think this is too much. I think this is where we need to be, but I need to go get a belt for it. But that's not going to happen today, and you're going to see all that on a future episode of Carnage. Whoops, I forgot. Next week is Drag Challenge. That's right, Street Machine Drag Challenge. It's the event we tried to run in 2020 when we all know how that panned out. And then 2021. And then again in 2022, and then we got this massive weather event, which means we had to delay it to next week. All right, so we're finally running Drag Challenge 2022. It's going to be on next week, which means we're not going to have an episode of Carnage next Friday. We're going to have a full week of Drag Challenge instead. All right, so we will be back. We just won't be there next week. So enjoy the Drag Challenge videos. Make sure you watch them because they will be awesome. And we'll see you the week after that. Catch you then.